What's going on, everybody? So I'm back today to do another review, and this is a film that I don't want to say excited for, but I would say cautiously optimistic. I'm obviously a big horror fan. If you've watched a lot of my reviews, you know I'm really into the genre, and as of recently, there's been a lot of revivals to horror franchises, sequels, remakes, a slew of just trying to give the horror community these characters that are beloved and cared for, franchises back or redeeming characters or whatnot. And so I saw last year the announcement for the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, which is directed by David Blue Garcia, and a screenwriting credit to Fede Álvarez, which I just recently did a compare and contrast video of Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead and the remake, and Fede Álvarez directed the remake of Evil Dead, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So having his name attached onto the property really excited me, and I was looking forward to it. And this movie was a steaming pile of dog shit. Felt like I enjoyed elements of it. But as I've mulled over it for a couple days and thought about it, there's just really a lot about this movie that I can't stand, and I'll get into it into the review. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by David Blue Garcia, the face of madness returns. After nearly 50 years of hiding, Leatherface returns to terrorize a group of idealistic young friends who accidentally disrupt his carefully shielded world in a remote Texas town. This group of friends who are driving into Harlow, Texas, this small town, and they're internet influencers who are trying to go into this place to build this community of open-minded free thinkers that are going to establish this town so they don't have to pay crazy inflated prices for stuff, and just essentially create this community of like-minded individuals, which at its core sounds like a really interesting premise, but it's executed very poorly. The characters have limited to virtually no development with the exception of Elsie Fisher. What makes this movie suffer more than anything is, rather than create this piece where you're taking a legacy character like Leatherface that people for some reason enjoy outside of the first Texas Chainsaw film. I have only seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the new one. I did a review a while back on my thoughts. I think it's a great horror film. I think it's truly terrifying. It has a very gritty, realistic feel. And for some reason, people have admiration for this character over the years, despite, from what I've read of reviews of the sequels, them being awful and terrible, with the exception of Tobe Hooper's sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which I've heard is a delightful, silly, stupid movie that I'm really looking forward to watching. You have this group of kids going into this town. They think it's completely evacuated, with the exception of this like redneck character who is the one working on the buildings for them. This weird interaction between him and one of the girls in the car at the beginning of the film, where it was like so just sloppily executed, and it just made like the delivery of the line was like, okay, I get what you're going for, but it just felt really lazy. And then they get into town, and there's a woman living in an orphanage with a character who we never see their face, which you immediately know it's Leatherface right out of the gate. And then chaos begins to ensue. I guess my biggest issue with this film overall is the character development. There really is nothing to these characters. You don't really develop enough insight as to why they're doing this and to why you should care about why they're creating this community. If anything, you just feel bad for the old lady who is living in the town forced off of her property, but she seems to be an old racist, so you don't really care very much about her anyway. When you're writing a film, and their 80s slasher films are guilty of this to a certain degree, but you look at a franchise like Friday the 13th, where even if you don't give the characters exponentially deep qualities where it's like you care about their past or anything, you give them like an over-exaggerated personality element to where you're committed enough to that character that when they get killed off, you feel something. You like feel miserable or sad, or you think it's funny because they're an asshole or something. This movie introduces this group of incredibly unlikable people that just from the get-go, I did not give two shits about what happened to any of them, with the exception of Elsie Fisher's character, who, as far as performances go, Every performance in this film is pretty forgettable. They all seem like they could be really talented actors, but the direction in this is just completely awful, and so they give very bland performances. Elsie Fisher's character is the only one given anything to do. You have this look into her past. She's a survivor of a school shooting. It's executed really ham-fisted, and I'll talk a little bit when I get into spoilers about her character arc, but it is one of the stupidest things I have ever seen in a movie. Despite that, Leatherface looks kind of cool. He cuts off a human face and puts it on his own face and is running around killing people with a chainsaw. But I think what makes this movie so irritating is that the bulk of the amount of kills in this film, they have this like party bus that they brought all these people into town who are supposed to be investors for this town where they're going to establish their businesses or whatever, and they're trying to make you care about what's going on. And there's this huge scene that takes place on the party bus where like 10 people get murdered back to back to back. And there is no reason for it. The only reason why it exists is to give Leatherface the opportunity to murder all of these people. And it's so stupid because none of them really even try to get off the bus. It's just like loud screaming. And the visual effects are really cool. They look neat. They're very well executed. But the whole time you're like, wow, these people are so fucking stupid. There's a million things you could try to get off of this bus, and they don't try to do any of it. And despite it being filled with moronic horror tropes, it's just lazy. And all the kills in this are really lazy. They look great as far as visual effects. They're very brutal. There's one kill in particular where Leatherface uses his hammer, like in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's very brutal. It looks really grisly, but it ends up amounting to nothing because the movie has no core. There is no redemption arc. There's no real heavy emotional moments for any of the character, other than the plot arc for Elsie Fisher's character, which I'm going to get into when I talk about spoilers. But yeah, it's really dumb. Then you have the inclusion of a legacy character like Sally Hardesty, who is shoehorned into this film for 15 minutes to accomplish nothing. She's just there because they looked at Halloween 2018 and said, oh, we brought back Jamie Lee Curtis for this film. People seem to be very excited about her in this trilogy, so let's bring back a legacy character, the only one who survived. And it's just really dumb. It tries to pull at the audience's heartstrings, so to speak, and saying, remember the original film? You liked this character. You felt really bad for her. Let's throw her in because you don't care about any of the other characters in this entire film, and let's throw her in like the last 30 minutes of the runtime so that she can be in it for 15 minutes so you can say, oh, I'll feel something for a brief 15 minutes, but it's so stupid and sloppy that by the time it's done, you just don't give a shit. I get into spoilers, put a time code in to skip over to when I get done, but there's one element that I want to talk about that I think is one of the stupidest things I've seen in a film in a long time, and I'm going to get into it now. Elsie Fisher's character is the survivor of this school shooting. There's a scene at the beginning where the redneck guy who's in the town pulls a gun out. She like has a skittish moment and runs away from it. And at the end of the movie, she is the one wielding the gun, trying to stop Leatherface, and it doesn't really make any sense that the person who survived the school shooting is the one getting a gun and going crazy to try to kill Leatherface. It's really sloppily executed and lazy. You could try to view it as this like take the power back scenario because this is something that's haunted her for a long time, but it's just so lazily executed and stupid. And I just watched it and I'm like, who threw this together? And I read something that said people throughout the production changed within the first week. I think the idea of killing Sally Hardesty's character gives her no redemption arc about watching her friends die before her eyes and everything horrible that happened to her character. And it just pissed me off more than anything. And then at the end of the film, you have this bond between two sisters of Elsie Fisher's character and her sister, who is an incredibly forgettable character who gets pulled out of the car and her head chopped off by a chainsaw, which was one of the most comical moments I've seen in a film in a long time, because by the end of it, I just didn't care and I was ready for it to be over. Not to mention, you look at like Leatherface would be in his 70s. How is he moving the way that he's moving? He's like, it's like they've implied now that all of these characters who were just in these movies that were psychologically disturbed or committed horrendous acts are just superhuman for the hell of it. Like Michael Myers in Halloween Kills Another stupid fucking movie that I wish I never would have sat through. You have this character who, in the original John Carpenter Halloween, was just a guy. He was a guy who, young kid, went crazy, killed his sister, and then he, years later, got out of a mental institution and went crazy and started killing people. He's not superhuman. He's not invincible. Only franchise that has done that successfully, with the exception of Nightmare on Elm Street, because Freddy Krueger is this all-powerful supernatural entity, is the Friday the 13th franchise. And they explain that Jason has been resurrected. He's not human anymore. And there's a reason for it. And despite the fact that those Friday the 13th movies are all really stupid, really dumb, they're executed well because they know they're dumb. The directors and the filmmakers understand that they're making a stupid movie, and they tell their audience the dumb shit that's going to happen. Rather than these films that just throw these really over-the-top ideas at you and say, you should just believe it because it's what we've put on screen. And it just really irritated me. It's just a very lazy film by people who don't care about the franchise, and that's what's upsetting. When you create these films, and if you look at Scream 2022, which I did a review on, this new Scream 5 2022 was not my favorite of the franchise by any means, but you can tell the creators of the film gave a fuck about Wes Craven's legacy and about what he was trying to create, and they made a film that was similar enough tonally and in execution that it felt like a great addition to the franchise. Although it's not my favorite, I think it's a worthwhile entry in the series, and it's people who care very deeply. I did the Evil Dead review recently about the remake. Fede Álvarez clearly cared about Sam Raimi's vision, wanted to apply it to his film, and created his own unique film that used elements from the original, but added something to that overall franchise. This Texas Chainsaw film adds nothing to the franchise other than some pretty brutal kills, and that's about it. It left me not ever wanting to see it again. I don't care enough about it to ever watch it again. And I doubt, from looking at the reviews and the scores on Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd and IMDb, that there will ever be another one of these films. And so, in short, I would not recommend this movie. So that's my thoughts on Texas Chainsaw. I thought it was really poorly written, poorly acted, with the exception of Elsie Fisher, who I think is incredibly talented, and I look forward to whatever Elsie does in the future. I loved her performance in 8th grade, and I'm really looking forward to whatever she makes next because she's really talented. She gives everything in the performance in this film with what little material she has to work with. And other than that, this movie is a forgettable pile of trash, and you should avoid it at all costs. So have you seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought it was really stupid. And if you're in for just a stupid hour-and-a-half long movie where you can watch some cool visual effects, then by all means, jump in feet first. But I just thought it was really dumb. As always, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot, lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always trying to put out new content out there for you all because I really have fun making these videos and engaging with you guys as the audience. And as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.